astronomical and kind of unforeseen success levels that the Pokemon franchise reached brought with it plenty of lookalikes, clones as many people unfairly call them, and a whole new subgenre of RPG came along with it. The Game Boy's late resurgence, largely thanks to Pokemon Red and Blue, gave the monochrome old codger another few years of life. It had previously already been slated for a more advanced follow-up, which of course was pushed back to 2001. Suddenly, with fans practically drooling for these monster collecting games, and a system that was perfect for them despite being nearly a decade old, we'd see all sorts of variations on the theme. Robopon, Medarot, Keitai Denju Telefang, to name but 3. One that isn't talked about very often, but is still worthy of discussion if you ask me, is Koei's Monster Star Race. Released almost a year to the day before this official sequel, number 1 in the series of Monster Race also spawned its own interesting sequel called Monster Race Okawari, which Game Freak haven't done in one of their games yet. The first title also came out on the PlayStation in Japan, but apparently wasn't much fun, with absolutely ruthless AI. Thankfully, the Game Boy version was much more reasonable. Other than that, there was a 2009 DS title, which to date remains the only title in the series to be released anywhere outside of Japan. The premise of Monster Race, or Mondre for short, is to collect monsters, as I'm sure you've twigged onto by now. However, the race part of the title should tell you that you're not catching them and training them to battle, but rather to race against each other. Now, the monsters run on their own, so don't worry about having to direct them or anything. You're the coach in this scenario. It's down to you to figure out how to get the most out of your creatures, and which ones will be more successful based on the terrain and stamina demands of the various courses. Different monsters have different affinities for terrains, which acts as this game's type matching, if you like, and will also have limited stamina, after which they'll tire and slow down. There are courses of grass, rock, ice, that sort of thing, but you'll also find some where monsters with a jump affinity or a balance affinity will have an advantage. Each one of these types will also have 2 subtypes, one that's easier and one that's harder. For the harder ones, you really have to pay attention to a monster's skill set. For the easier one, you might get away with it if the other stats are good. It's a nice variation on the theme. Obviously, your monsters can grow in level, which will increase their stats, teach them new skills, and even sometimes evolve into stronger forms. This all sounds very familiar, I know, but just bear with it. You can capture wild animals by beating them in a race, and even fuse 2 together to create new ones. All this while growing yourself from small-town novice to world champion. The monster's stats come in various forms. Stamina is one of the most important ones, as mentioned. Should this run out during a race, you can pretty much say goodbye to your chances. 80% of this will be replenished after a race, or you can take your monsters to a rejuvenation station. A new feature in Monster Race 2 is that the player is now given a class based on their ability, from flyweight at the bottom to heavyweight at the top. This determines how many monsters you can have in your party at any one time, with higher classes granting more spaces. These sorts of games depend usually on a fair bit of learning, especially when it comes to type matching and so on. That's not really the case here, as each monster has a detailed information screen showing what their strengths and weaknesses are. Train and catch whatever you think you need, then take on the various cups that you'll find in the towns along the journey. These involve a series of races against other trainers. Note that you can switch monsters in and out of a race whenever you need to, so make the most out of your full squad. It's all too easy to criticize these so-called Pokemon clones and dismiss them as such, but remember for a second how huge of a deal those games were when they first came out. Of course, people are going to try to capitalize on the success, and this was far from the first genre of video games this happened with. How many Dragon Quest clones, or even Pac-Man clones, are there? Pac-Man itself is a clone of an earlier game. Sure, they're not all winners, but others in the genre outside of Pokemon still have plenty to like about them. The trick is keeping the concept fresh by adding enough new stuff. Monster Race has plenty of intrigue as a series, and the now 200 monsters have had a lot of care put into their creation. And gameplay-wise, it's impressive just how balanced this title is. With so many stats and typings to consider, this can't have been an easy feat.